In this video, we're going to talk about the ever-evolving franchises IP that Disney uses in their parks. And the question kind of persists, how can these parks keep up with the ever-evolving IP changes? It's a fascinating topic. We're going to discuss it up next. Welcome aboard to another episode of Orange Grove 55. In this video, we are going to talk about the ever-evolving franchises of the Walt Disney Company and how it affects the parks, which are more of a long game. Fascinating conversation, but before we dive into that, I'm going to introduce my fantastic panel. Start off with Mr. Dre Vaskai, host of Freshly Squeezed. Dre, how you doing today, brother?
Doing pretty good. Feel good. Feel better than I have in a long time. So it's good to be recovered, and it's good to share the stage with you. This is pretty cool. This is pretty awesome. Very interesting topic filled with a lot of interesting discussion. I'll get it out of the way. At Vash Skies, where you can find me right there, and you can see me on Orange Grove 55, the channel you're watching right now, at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove. So that's where you can find me.
Perfect. Thank you, brother. And down below, Mr. D Family Man 23, George, host of Citrus Corner. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good, and I must say, thank God that Mr. Vaskai took the motion for that, because with my balls to the wall, I don't think that would be a very good setup for that. So,
yeah, that would be a conflict. Yes,
that is true. And where can everybody at home find you on social media, sir?
Well, with that being said, you could find me on my own YouTube channel at Disney Family Man 23, which is also the same for my Instagram. You could also find me on Twitter at Disney George. And as you had mentioned, OG, you could find me on your channel with Citrus Corner.
Perfect. Oh, there we go.
We're all dialed in.
We're all clocked in. So the topic is very interesting, and actually I want to give credit to George. This is actually a topic idea from Mr. Family Man about the ever-evolving franchises and how it affects the parks. And basically, to kind of set the table before we start diving into this, basically what this means is, like, you take a franchise like Marvel, right? And it's this episodic kind of thing that's constantly changing. I mean, we have a completely new Captain America now than we did a few years ago. We got we're entering the multiverse. We got all, multiple SpiderMans, and these franchises move so fast now, and they constantly change and evolve. How can the parks kind of match that when the parks, it takes 3, 4, 5 years, or in Tron's case, 10 or 15 years to build? How do you match that and keep things relevant? I think it's a fair question, right? It's a fair question. So I'll start with you, Dre. What are your thoughts on this, on trying to maintain some sort of consistency between the parks and the franchises? How do we do that? Should they do that? What are your thoughts?
This is a very interesting discussion, because WDI has, and even Disney and C-Suite and all the rest, have had this kind of internal debate going back for decades, as far as I know. I mean, there was an old discussion about, hey, let's update Star Tours for the prequel trilogy. Episode 1 came out, big movie, lot to pull from. Let's go ahead and incorporate that into the ride finally. It's been so many years. The ride opens in 1987. Phantom Menace comes out in 1999, and it's like, okay, let's really do it now. They were going to do some kind of pod racing thing. They were going to have 3D technology even back then, where you're going to get glasses that kind of emulated what Anakin wore in that film. It was all kind of storyboarded out. They were going to do it, and it was just like, yeah, but these next films are still coming out. How about we wait and allow these films to come out, and that we can pull from, this entire 2 trilogies worth of films, so to speak. And And but this kind of dialogue and discussion, I mean, it goes back a long time. Even like Avatar, for example. I mean, there are discussions about increasing the size of Pandora, the world of Avatar, at Animal Kingdom. But from WDI's perspective, it's kind of like, well, we kind of want to see what these new films bring. If they are coming, that is. That's another discussion. But they kind of want to wait because they kind of want to see what James Cameron incorporates going forward, so that they can kind of stay, ahead of the curve and relevant when it comes to this kind of stuff. So it's a fascinating discussion, and there are ways that WDI does kind of incorporate that kind of thinking into their design that we'll discuss later on today.
Well, did you hear, Dre, that WDI is waiting for James Cameron, but James Cameron is waiting for Tron?
Oh, I said, it's a little tight. You know what? I did not know that. I didn't know it was back and forth like that. Well, you better get Tron open then, isn't it?
So George, what are your thoughts? This is your topic. What are your thoughts on this kind of dilemma they have with keeping up with the ever evolving IP?
Well, I think for me, and it started kind of dwelling on the sense, is right after I saw the new SpiderMan film, because I still don't want to give any spoilers because I'm for sure there's still people out there who still haven't seen it.
Well, I'll go ahead and drop it. Go ahead. Well, unless Dre, you haven't seen it yet, or have you?
Sorry about that. I have not. Spoiler alert. But I can kind of. I have heard enough to understand what the implications are.
So I'll put it in this matter. I'll say that at the very end, there's a notion going around that Peter will just be known as just Spider-Man. He doesn't have the split identity of being known as Spider-Man and Peter Parker. So that really gives the sense of, okay, then where is this character moving forward? Is it going to be Tom Holland's Spider-Man, or is it going to move to another Spider-Man from the Spider-Verse or what have you? And it takes me back to when I visited Avengers Campus and we saw, Tom Holland as Spider-Man with the Stuntronic and even the ride, the web slingers, because it's involving a character who now is known as an unknown, because in the queue line for web slingers, it's Tom Holland as Peter Parker, and then it moves into Spider-Man. So it's now, after everyone that sees the new Spider-Man movie, how much relevant is it going to be for the ride, where it's like, okay, we're moving on in the movies, but we're kind of stuck in this time zone. And that's where I feel that Galaxy's Edge is stuck with, because you're locked in this time frame when you're just dealing with Rey and Kylo Ren, and it's like it starts to get old after a while, because it's like after seeing Rise of Skywalker, we all know what happened. Okay, spoiler alert for people who didn't see Rise of Skywalker, but Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, dies at the end of the film. So it's like, and he becomes good. He's part of the Resistance, and now it's like when you kind of look at Kylo Ren as a villain, you're kind of looking at him like, okay, he's really not a threat anymore. We all know what he turns into. But then you also have the other side, where if you look at the Beauty and the Beast attraction over in Tokyo, am I correct, Vash?
Yeah, Tokyo Disney.
Tokyo. Mm-hmm. That's a timeless piece. So no matter how old a film is, you can always go back and relive that, because it's just a one standalone film based off of a fairy tale. But when you take something like Star Wars and Marvel, you kind of have to move along with the storyline as it goes along. You can have certain things, but I think it's something that you would want to move along, with the storyline, so it kind of fits well. And I think that's where the not the VR stipulation would come in. It would be the other one that they're working on. What is it? Not the VR, the other that they're working in the parks.
Black box AR.
That AR, that's it. Sorry, I couldn't think of that. And I think that's where the AR would fit in, because then you can constantly transition different attractions, or even, as you had mentioned, the black box, that they can change things very easily as the shows and the movies progress.
Right. Well, here's the dilemma that they're in too. When this is the problem. When you pre-plan, it can lead to problems down the road. Like, for example, because when you pre-plan, you don't know how successful something's going to be. Like, for example, Batu was a pre-planned sort of scenario where the sequel trilogy wasn't even like done yet. And they already had it mapped out where they're going to have Batu based on the sequel trilogy, right? So when you pre-plan in advance, it leads to problems because you don't know how that film or films or whatever is going to land with audiences. So you're kind of like hedging your bets. You're sort of like, you're building something that you really don't know. And we saw problems with Galaxy's Edge doing that when they sort of assumed the sequel trilogy would be beloved by all fans, and it really wasn't. And it's like, now you have this permanent fixture. What do you do, right? So the pre-planning is a problem. But not planning is also a problem, because if you just sort of go by what's hot right now, you run the risk of it being outdated later on. Like, I'll give you an example. Island of Adventure, Marvel Island. This was Marvel, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this was Marvel 20 years ago. But now a lot of kids don't recognize this kind of it's very comic-y. Right? Very comic booky. Most people associate Marvel now with the MCU. These versions of the characters are very outdated. So when you just do the here and now, eventually it becomes outdated as well. So what do you do? That's the dilemma. What do you do to keep these fresh? Now, I do think, and I think, George, you touched upon this with the AR, the black box technology, like screen-based technology, things like that. I think that's in Disney's corner. Like, Mission Breakout is a lot of screens, easily updatable, easily adaptable. You can swap things out. Even web slingers, I think they completely dropped the ball on not tying that into No Way Home, but I mean, they could have, in theory, if they wanted to. The screen-based rides are very adaptable, and that might be the answer, is more screens. I know fans don't like screens, but it's way more adaptable than something that, like, the more traditional e-tickets like Rise of the Resistance that are very animatronic heavy. So
now let me ask you fellas this. Now, OG, you had mentioned about, there could be a problem if you plan too far in advance or if you don't plan at all.
Right.
Had they would have waited for No Way Home to come out first prior to making Web Slingers, and for the massive success it has been, and it's still growing, it may even potentially beat Avatar, that do you fellas feel that they would have changed the whole dynamics of what the Spider-Man attraction would be, and not just make it a C or D attraction and make it more of an e-ticket attraction?
I'll go to you, Dre, for that one.
I think it's debatable. I think there was potential to make it e-ticket attraction before. I don't think Doctor Strange's inclusion or some of the aspects brought to to this kind of MCU kind of multiverse change a whole lot, in terms of, like, there were many goals with Spider-Man that WDI and the operators of DCA were trying to accomplish with that attraction. So I don't think that would have changed too much. I think maybe possibly things could have played out maybe a little bit differently regarding the kind of the content featured in the attraction. I think that's a distinct possibility, and I think that's kind of why, or at least that's kind of like what I was kind of hoping, was that they were going to leverage the screen-based technology that they have as part of Spider-Man to incorporate kind of some more subplots and stories that surround the Spider-Man character as he's progressed in the MCU. We heard about holiday overlays for, like, Toy Story Big Way Mania, for example. We never got those, but I was like, well, okay, they might resurrect that idea in this form, bringing in Doctor Strange and some of the other characters. We always see that with the meet and greets outside, right? But they haven't done that. So to answer your question, I don't think the actual ride itself would have been altered in a significant way, but I do think the content would have, for sure.
Right. Yeah. Like the physical aspect of the attraction. It's still going to be you're in a vehicle and you're going from screen to screen. That's never going to change, you know?
Yeah.
But like what Dre was saying, the content might change. They could animate and create new scenes for those screens that relate to the multiverse, that relate to No Way Home, kind of tied all together. And I'm really shocked they didn't. I am super shocked because the buzz for No Way Home was through the roof. And it just seems like a real missed opportunity.
It became my favorite Marvel movie thus far.
Wow.
That's
big praise. That's big praise. I mean,
because there were certain scenes in that film, particularly towards the end, that I think would have been one kick-ass attraction had they would have incorporated that with the swinging pendulum. That would have, that would have been really kick-ass.
I mean, even before No Way Home, there was so much potential surrounding the Spider-Man character for a really stellar kind of over the top attraction, especially following the success of Rise, right? And I don't think there's any question that it was a little bit of a disappointment upon its reception. Go ahead, OG. What were you gonna say?
Well, no, I was gonna say that like even Guardians, right? Like, and I think George, I think you referenced this when you were kind of pitching your topic idea to me. You were saying that like James Gunn made a comment about Guardians 3, right?
Yes,
and about how it's gonna be a very different film, and we don't know like the future of these characters as the Guardians that we know it's pretty much done. So even Guardians, like, you're building this cosmic rewind over in Florida based on these characters. And who knows, in 5 years, what makes up the Guardians of the Galaxy might be a completely different mixture of characters, right? So it's like, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Because now, Cosmic Rewind opens summer of 22.
Right.
Volume 3 comes out, what, 23?
I think so.
So that's literally 1 year around the time when the attraction opens to oppose when this film is released. And then, as you had mentioned, who really knows? Because he specifically said that this is the end that we see these group. And what was funny was he said these group of Guardians.
Right. Exactly. That's why I'm saying it's going to be. I think Guardians of the Galaxy will be kind of a mantle that's ever changed. Like there will be a Guardians of the Galaxy group, but the characters will be interchangeable. So this group that we know that we've kind of grown fond of over the years probably won't be the Guardians anymore. At least some of them won't be with us anymore, is what I took from his comment,
That might have been a driving force, and maybe why they went, they omitted audio animatronics as we know it in Cosmic Rewind and went to like pure screen based, right? So you kind of build in this adaptability, this flexibility into your attraction to allow for an update of these characters and designs and so forth. And I think maybe that was also one of the prevailing design philosophies for Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout in California. I mean, it's screen based, like you said, OG. You can update it seemingly at will, and outside of Rocket, I mean, that incarnation of the Guardians can be whatever you want. So I think that surrounding like Star Wars and Marvel into the future, I think that's going to be pretty major.
That is. Now, is there a place, because George, you brought up Beauty and the Beast, and I think that was a good example. Because in Beauty and the Beast, and ever since the movie came out, it's always been kind of a thing in the back of my mind, right? At the end of Beauty and the Beast, spoiler alert, I'm going to drop a spoiler alert real quick. In case you haven't seen Beauty and the Beast, but at the end of Beauty and the Beast turns into a human. So
seriously,
but when you went to the parks, it was always the Beast walking around. It was never. I think his name was Prince Adam.
Adam,
right?
Adam.
Is it Prince Adam?
Prince
I
Adam.
think so yeah.
Yeah,
I did not know
Adam.
that.
But you
That's
never
not
saw
French.
but you never saw Prince Adam walking around. It was always the Beast. So it's kind of the same kind of thing that we're seeing with like the Marvel and Star Wars stuff, where it's kind of like the representation in the parks is very much outdated compared to what we saw in the films. So that's interesting. That's interesting. So does it matter even? I don't know. I don't know if fans care. Like with Beauty and the Beast, they didn't seem to mind too much. Will they mind though with the cinematic universe?
Yes.
You know,
that's where I feel like it goes kind of both ways. I think like when it comes time for like classic films that are just like kind of like a one and done sort of thing, like Beauty and the Beast, I think that's more like keep it the way it is. You know, you relive that classic story, and it's like it's like in a time capsule. You know, it has the fountain of youth, so to speak. But I think when it comes time for Star Wars and Marvel, and I as I briefly mentioned before, I think this is where Galaxy's Edge, it's Achilles' heel, so to speak, because it is locked in a specific time zone, and we're done with the Skywalker saga as far as with the continuing storyline, and you know it's done and over with, and it's like how much of it will be right now that Rise of the Resistance is at its like, you know, glory as far as being able to have people come down, you know, get into the queue line or what have you, get a lightning pass, but then how much longer would it take for them to say, okay, this is a great attraction, but the storyline behind this attraction and technology, it's getting too old, especially as we progress with Disney Plus, because we're moving forward with Mandalorian season 3. The Book of Boba Fett is about to have its epic finale. I'm sorry, I'm just saying it's going to be an epic finale no matter what.
Yeah.
So
give it big.
Yeah. So it's like we're moving forward with that, but yet when we go to the parks, I'm sorry, I want to experience Mandalorian in the parks.
Right.
I've experienced Reylo, you know,
Hey, you know what? Move over Reylo. After watching Book of Boba, it's all about, and I'm gonna put it up here right now. It's all about Luke Soka.
Yeah, boy, I like it.
Move over, Reylo. It's all about Luke Soka now.
Hey, you know what? Think of how much that Disney and Lucasfilm could sell on that, because that would be a perfect title for a laundry detergent. Like they can sell mint.
They could. Now, George, you brought up a fantastic point real quick. I just want to say that
go ahead.
The problem with modern, like the current WDI, and I've said this before, and this plays into that. They're so focused on the story. And it sounds good. It's a good PR thing. It makes it look like it's tied to Walt and all that stuff. But when you get too bogged down when you make attractions like Rise of the Resistance, as amazing of a ride or attraction that is, it's very story focused and very specific, right? But a lot of the greatest rise attractions that WDI has created are not really story specific. They're more experiences. Even Indiana Jones Adventure, which is based on a very popular IP, is more of an experience about generalized things that you would experience in Indiana Jones. It's not like a beginning to end story. Right.
Or even the original Star Tours. They had a complete Rex. He was nowhere near the original films. He was just a character that was created for that attraction. And there was nothing specific that tied into the films that made it timeless.
Right. It was just a Star Wars experience overall. And Indiana Jones is more or less an Indiana Jones experience overall. And that vagueness sort of it kind of creates a sense of timelessness, you know? Yeah. And that's the problem with a lot of modern rides that WDI creates. They want like a beginning, middle, end story, and it dates it. But go ahead, Dre. What are your thoughts on this, man?
Well, it kind of ties into what I was going to say. I mean, look, I've got Mark Davis's, the 2-book set there. And one of his big design philosophies was, doing a story on an attraction doesn't really work. That was kind of his thing.
Right.
It's just not the right format for it. His whole thing was, I mean, he just couldn't get out of this. I mean, he was very kind of vignette driven, right? Like you just have like these these side little stories, right? And they're just like these maquettes in the featured in this distinct part of the attraction, or so to speak, right? But he was never on board with like the whole like, oh, we're gonna have like a story from beginning, middle, and end. I mean, from what I understand, he like hated the interpretation that Tony Baxter and the team did for the Haunted Mansion in Disneyland Paris. I mean, he was not like a fan of it, I guess. Alice Davis has been pretty, she's pretty brutal. She's like, they made it all about the bride. It doesn't make any sense, It's just, right. When you get too invested in it, right? If you get too bogged down, I mean, you just lose people. And that's what we're seeing a lot from this kind of, WDI. We're just seeing, like you said, OJ, we are seeing a lot of that, right? Previously, back to your point about Beating the Beast and Prince Adam being in the park versus the Beast being in the park, right? It was always about what's the most popular, iconic thing from this, movie or show or whatever, and let's like try to incorporate that into our design as much as we can, right? So it's like, look at Star Tours. You gotta have Death Star run, right? you gotta be there with Luke Skywalker. You gotta have Death Star. You gotta have the Empire and stuff like that. Doesn't make any sense, but everybody wanted to do that, right? Even when they were talking about redoing Star Tours, Tom Fitzgerald tells a story about how, they were showing George the storyboards, and it's like, okay, we're gonna go here, we're gonna go to Kashyyyk, we're gonna go to this planet, this planet, this planet. He's just like, well, where's Hoth or where are the walkers? And it's like, well, that this timeline wouldn't really make sense. And he goes, who cares? Because it's just like everybody wanted to see that. That's what they came to expect from a Star Wars type experience, especially one that they were going with the modern version of Star Wars Adventures Continue. It's fascinating because, like, when Maleficent came out, remember the Maleficent movie that came out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Angela Jolie and so forth. Well, there were times when they would bring out the Maleficent walk around that they would have for the parks, normally, and people would go, no, we want the Maleficent, the version of Maleficent we saw in the Maleficent movie. Right. And they'd be like, uh-oh. They wouldn't really know what to do. That just shows you how sometimes times change and they evolve, and sometimes you have to keep up, but other times things are just kind of timeless and iconic, and it's this balancing act you have to do.
Yeah, and Dre, real quick, I want to touch upon this. I made a video yesterday about how, like, sometimes fans and Disney, like both entities, sort of take things too seriously, and it takes the fun out of it. Like, and this happens so much. I think Star Wars as a franchise is guilty of this more than anything. Star Wars gets so bogged down in canon. Yeah. Well, this happened and we can't do this because of this and this and that and that. Marvel doesn't give a shit about any of that. The comics are all over the place. They're just there to have fun, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I'm not saying just throw everything out the window and just have a free for all, but I think sometimes you have to let go a little bit and just have fun. Walt Disney did this a lot, like when he built the Matterhorn, he wasn't sitting there going, well, the real Matterhorn doesn't have a monorail around it. I don't want to ruin the experience of feeling like you're on the Matterhorn, right? It's very much like he just wanted to have fun, and these are his toys. He just want to play with them. And Dre, you touched upon that with Star Tours. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, but to have the walkers and this, that, and the other, who cares? It's fucking dope, right?
Probably the best way that I could describe it is being on with you fellas, a couple times a week doing this. This is like Marvel. We are the Marvel. Then I was part of another, and I won't say the name of it, but I was part of another group of a podcast. They're more Lucasfilm.
Straight in there, huh?
Yeah. Hey, going balls to the wall here.
There we go. Hold on. Let's drop it on.
Up.
There we go. Let's drop it on.
There it is. Ball to the walls alert right there. But no, OG, I mean, you're exactly right. And it's like that's what the most frustrating thing about Galaxy's Edge is, to George's point. It's like, God, I can't get any other characters because we're locked in this timeline before Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. Isn't this great? And it's like, yeah, it's great when you see it like the first 3 times. And then it's like, okay, well, I'd like to get any of the myriad of characters in this universe in here. And it's like, no, we can't. We gotta stick to the timeline. And it's like, well, I'm looking at Avengers Campus over there, and they've got they've got Sam Wilson's Falcon next to Steve Rogers is Captain America, both versions next to each other, right? We've got all kinds of people interacting between each other, and it's like nobody cares. Like nobody, they want to see their characters, they want to see their stories, and that's why I think Scott Drake, when he was developing the stuff for Avengers Campus and all the other Marvel iterations around the world, I think his, or at least his team's big mindset was like, we're not going to get bogged down in the Star Wars, Galaxy's Edge canon thing, right? We're not going to get, it's not going to be locked into a time period. We're just going to mix them all up, and the audience will accept it. And sure enough, they have to a bigger extent than they have maybe with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, because it's supposed to be Star Wars land. And, how do you explain to people? It's like, oh, you're not going to see Darth Vader because we're in this section of the time. That's a tough conversation.
And there was something that I think it was like fan art that somebody made. I can't recall who actually made it. It's like of a park map, like a sort of like how like a Disney park, but they designed it of how they would have loved to have seen Star Wars land to be. And in the center of it, like of how it would be for Cinderella Castle and what have you, it would be the Death Star. And then surrounding it are different lands, but that would be representation of the different planets. So you would have Hoth on one side, Tatooine on another. And I looked at this concept art as far as like from the fan base goes, and I tell you what, that thing looked kick ass. I mean, if that actually was real, I would go to that. And it's like they had like so much into it. And I can't recall who actually made that. I do apologize. I can't recall. But do you know what I'm talking about?
I've seen it.
I've seen it too. Now, OG, do you? I have heard you in the past on this. I think you might have a different feeling about that.
On that concept art.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't too much of a fan of that. I do like the overall idea of a planet you go to where it feels like you're on the planet. I did feel like the concept art felt a little too much like Star Wars Magic Kingdom. But look, in regards to Batu, I am fully supportive of loosening up the timeline. I think that you can have the original trilogy, the prequels, the sequels, and do it in a way that makes sense. And the land is big enough that you don't have to even necessarily have Darth Vader standing next to Anakin Skywalker. You can, you can have them separated. Disney does this all the time. They don't have two Mickeys standing near each other at the same time. You can have Mickey Mouse on Main Street and then go all the way to Fantasyland and see Mickey as well. They're literally in the park at the same time, but they're at a distance where you're not seeing the two together. And I think they can incorporate some of that kind of philosophy and tactic with Star Wars land. Just have them separate a little bit so it's not jarring. Have all the sequel trilogy characters together, have all the prequel characters together, have all the OT characters together where they're separate out of sight from each other. I think it works. I think it works just fine.
But there was a period of time where they were a little bit laxed with Star Wars. I mean, if you remember like the Star Wars weekends when you would have all the characters come out at once, from different period time zones, you would have the Disney characters dressed as their favorite characters.
Yeah.
And it was like, I mean, now this might be going a little bit too much, but where they had Darth Vader coming out doing Thriller of Michael Jackson.
Oh, the Star Wars hoopla, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So it's like, I mean, that might have been going a little bit too much.
And twerking Boba Fett, that was really good.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Look, and that's the weird thing, I've had this discussion with George, off air. Just like, how could the company who, before they owned Star Wars, did more with Star Wars and the various characters than they do now? It's a really weird kind of thing. That now that they own it, you think, oh, it's, sky's the limit. And it's like, no, that's not, we have to stick with this time period. But to your point, OG, I mean, you could do it where the first 3 hours of operation, you have the prequels, all the prequel characters occupying this space. Then you have original, then you have, next 3 hours, maybe you could do maybe a combination of sequel and Mandalorian. And that way you can kind of go through it. And you could even do it to where if you have 3 different versions of, let's say, Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run, right? And that changes on the hourly basis, just like everything else. Like, there are so many ideas and possibilities, and the fact that they don't do that is bizarre. And the original sales pitch for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge was, we're creating a new area, like a new planet, right? Batuu, with its own kind of distinct culture and design set, so that it can be flexible to incorporate more Star Wars stories in the future. And it's like, okay, it's been a couple of years. Where's that at? You know, like, we didn't get a lot, but I would have thought that at least this would have
even if
made
they
the
were
cut.
to add in the Mandalorian season 3, maybe make an episode where Mando goes to Batuu. All you would need is just one episode for him to go to Batuu, and then boom, you open up that timeline that you can have a whole nother storyline there.
Well, and that's the thing too with Star Wars, is that the planets are visited by multiple eras of the franchise. Like you have Mando visiting Tatooine, right? Like you could totally realistically do it with Batuu. Like it's there. But here's the thing. It's a Lucasfilm problem, because obviously the budget is there when it comes to the parks, because Marvel does it.
Yeah.
Marvel's got Loki in every costume that he comes
within days. Within days of the episode.
Within the day, yeah. It's
right? With
crazy.
the day that the episode drops, Loki's in that land with that new outfit.
We have zombie Captain America.
Exactly. from What If and things like that. Like, it's obviously the parks are giving them the budget to do this stuff. It's obviously, I think Lucasfilm is just, like we said earlier, they're so tight with everything, and they're like, they don't want to break away. You got to get over this whole thing with canon, not free for all, but just loosen up a little bit, have some fun.
I've heard that the Marvel Studios provides the budget for the costumes and for the different iterations of characters that we see in Avengers Campus. They and I guess like that might come from the promotional budget of whatever they're putting out.
That's interesting.
How that works. I've heard the structure's different, but it's like, okay, well, then if it works over here, hear me out. Okay, all right. So a lot of people weren't watching Book of Boba Fett until some of these other characters came in. Now people are going back to watching. Okay,
right.
You could have had Boba Fett walking through Batuu and promoting this thing and like getting people hyped. Like,
yes,
what a concept.
And look, I love the Marvel shows. I loved Hawkeye. I love all of them, really. WandaVision, I was a huge fan of WandaVision, right? 70s Wanda, baby. 70s Wanda. Right? I love the Marvel shows. But I got to be real with you. Like, Mandalorian was a phenomenon. Mandalorian was lightning in a bottle, like Frozen, you know, that culture-changing seismic thing, that seismic event. Oh God, you had so much there, so much, and then you just squandered.
And we've talked about this many times before. A Grogu meet and greet. I mean, come on. That.
What if you had like the Razor Crest on that landing platform, and then Grogu like inside of it, where you can kind of meet and greet with him, you know, in the Razor Crest, like, you know, on one of those landing platforms in one of those free spaces. I mean, it's supposed to be Docking Bay 7 is that for a reason, right? It's supposed to be a spaceport. You could have had a Mandalorian take on the Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run attraction, you know, a version that incorporated Mando, and like where you're flying, getting to the Razor Crest and stuff, and he's coming on transmission. You could have done so much. It's like nothing. We got nothing from this, and like you said, OG, it was a phenomenon. It was everywhere. It was so crazy. Right. They were trying to pass off the Yoda figures as Grogu because they didn't have anything. They had bumper stickers and stuff like that. And it was just like, come on. It's just
and we kind of knew this was going to happen because when they showed previews of this during the expo for Mandalorian, people were signing up for Disney Plus, not even knowing what the hell they were signing up for. They just knew that they wanted to see Mandalorian.
Yeah. I'm telling you, Star Wars has a mint on their hands with the Mando stuff and Baby Yoda.
But they're not utilizing it. They got it right on a golden right on a golden platform, so to speak, and it's like, utilize it.
You know, one of the I'll end with this to bring it back to our original discussion of how WDI kind of tries to get ahead of the curve with a lot of this stuff, right? I mean, there was a concept that they were exploring for a long time. They might still be looking to implement this into the parks, but it was this black box concept, right? Where you have a space dedicated. Imagine like a show building, but with almost nothing in it, where you change some stuff around, the drapery, the walls that may collapse and fold in and so forth, and maybe an autonomous ride vehicle, not unlike what we see with Rise of Resistance or Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, and you put people through a space using projections and all kinds of technology through like the latest and greatest IP that is out. You know, a lot of people are like, well, where's the Encanto ride? I could just tell you, folks, we haven't gotten a Coco ride, maybe we're not getting Encanto, but maybe you could do this with a black box where it's open for like 3 months, right? And then you switch it out to the next thing. I think going forward, WDI is really going to be kind of exploring investing in technology for the reasons that we're talking about, right? So, because if a black box thing existed, maybe you do have something for Mandalorian that, we could have got, but weren't able to because, well, that black box didn't exist at the time.
Right. And to kind of close it out, the black box technology works, I think, very well for Star Wars, because everything with Star Wars is like, a lot of the when you translate Star Wars into the real world, into like a theme park environment, a lot of it's going to be screen based because you're dealing with like outer space and stuff. So that black box technology works so good with Star Wars because a lot of stuff already has to be screen based anyway. A lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it. So I think it would work perfect, but it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I want to have you fellas back on after Book of Boba Fett episode 7. And George, we'll have Josh on too. I want to have Josh on.
Yes.
Because I love Josh's passion. I love his passion for this stuff. We'll have him on next week with all of you guys, and we'll talk finale of Boba Fett and everything, because I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Sounds good.
It's gonna be big. I think it's gonna be big. I think you're gonna have some big stuff.
If episode 6 is how it actually turned out to be, I mean, I could imagine episode 7, because there's no way that they're gonna make episode 6 a high and come on a stale finale. There's no way.
There's no way. And I'm telling you, man, I know I sound like a total shill, a Favreau, Filoni shill. I don't care. I trust these guys, and they're gonna wrap this up. Look, Rebels was phenomenal storytelling, and there was a lot of stuff in Rebels when you're watching that series, and you're like, "What is that?" Like the space whales. Remember that?
Yeah.
But then at the end, the space whales played a big part in that finale. A huge part, and it was an intriguing aspect of that finale. I think they're going to hit a home run here with this. I hope I'm not overselling it. I hope they deliver, but I think I think a lot of stuff that a lot of people are like, oh man, why did they do that? I think it's going to make sense in that finale. I think it's going to be a huge win.
They're not people that don't map this stuff out. They know where they're going, right? And I don't think either of these guys have produced anything that I've been sincerely disappointed by the time the season finale hits. I think they've always hit those season finales strong, big, loud. So I think that's what we're gonna get.
Yeah, it's gonna be epic. It's gonna be epic. So we'll see. But I want to thank you, fellas, for joining me, talking a little shop today, talking some IP and the parks and everything. And George, I want to thank you for bringing this topic to my attention. It was a fantastic idea, sir.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure trying to come up with different ideas and topics to discuss with you fellas, because we really go in depth with all this. So it's always a pleasure.
It is. I'm going to start with Dre, and I'll go down to Mr. Family Man. Dre, where can everybody find you on social media?
Best place to find me and interact with me is at VashSky on Twitter, just like it's spelled right there. And if you want to see me, well, it's on the channel you're watching right now at OrangeCo55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove. So that's where you can find me.
Yes. Yes, sir. And then down below, Mr. D, Family Man 23, host of Sister's Corner. where can they find you, man?
You can find me on my YouTube channel, Disney Family Man 23, which is also my Instagram, on Twitter at Disney George, and of course on Orange Grove 55's channel, Wet Citrus Corner.
Yes, sir. And on TikTok, where he's twerking in Batu.
Yep.
Oh,
well, you have to think too. I have to catch up and kind of fill in for that entertainment that it's lacking. So.
That's true. Well, thank you guys for coming on. I do appreciate it. And thank you all so much for watching. If you can comment down below with your thoughts on how Disney can sort of keep up with this ever-evolving landscape regarding the franchises. We'd love to hear from you. How do they keep up? Should they even try to keep up? Maybe it's okay to have things that are outdated. Whatever your thoughts are, comment down below. Smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, and always have a wonderful, wonderful day.